Today's Washington Post makes the observation about President Trump that nearly every organization that he's led in the past decade is under investigation. To help us make sense of where we are in some of those investigations, we're joined now by Trevor Potter. He is the former chairman of the Federal Election Commission, and our CBS News correspondent, Paula Reid, who has been covering the Trump investigations. And you have your plate full there, Paula, with that description there. First off, I want to let you respond. Was there anything there in the defense of Michael Cohen from Lanny Davis that stood out to you?
Well, you really hit it. You said, well, did he need to be told not to lie? And that's the common theme that we see emerging throughout all of these investigations of the president, his attorneys, and their associates having trouble with the truth, being caught lying, having to plead guilty to lying. That has been a consistent theme. And I think you asked the perfect question was, did the White House need to tell him not to lie? He could have done that of his own volition. And
that is something that has come up with Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to the president, some defending him, saying, well, it wasn't disclosed to him that he shouldn't lie when he was speaking to FBI agents. Is that entrapment, as is being suggested?
Absolutely not. I mean, the special counsel came out hitting pretty hard this week against these claims by Flynn and his lawyers that he was somehow caught off guard by his FBI interview. And they released a memo and they said, look, you got a call from the deputy director of the FBI. You set up a voluntary interview at the location of your choice. You have 3 decades of public service. You've worked with the FBI. You know not to lie. We didn't do this to you. You did it to yourself.
Trevor, in an op-ed this week, you say that the president could become the target of a very serious campaign finance investigation, a criminal one. A lot of the defenders of the president say this is small ball. This isn't something that actually gets, while it gets to the doorstep of the president, it doesn't actually become something that could really become a legal issue for him. Why do you disagree?
Well, it's been an extraordinary week. You had the president's lawyer, Mr. Giuliani, say it's not a big deal, no one was killed. That is not the standard for the president of the United States in terms of complying with the law or all of these people around him. You know, if it were, we wouldn't have bank fraud prosecutions, money laundering, all sorts of other issues. What we have is a law that's central to our election system, to our democracy, that requires full disclosure of campaign spending and prohibits corporate money from being given to a candidate.
And that's where the AMI disclosure matters.
Correct. The owners of the National Enquirer, who agreed, apparently in a meeting with candidate Trump, to use their corporate money to buy the story and prevent the American public from knowing about it right in the middle of the run-up to the general election.
But the president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says none of this really is illegal because it wasn't direct campaign finance money. These were private payments.
Well, they weren't private payments. It turns out they were by a corporation or by Mr. Cohen in amounts in excess of what he could give. But I think the bigger picture here is the attempt to hide all this from the public. I mean, the Supreme Court has said that central to our campaign finance system is full disclosure of money being spent. Instead, what we've seen is this pattern of trying to deceive the public and hide the sources of money, and as I've said, in some cases, what apparently are illegal sources of money.
Paula, when it comes to the special counsel's investigation, because we're putting the other ones aside, how close are we to the conclusion of this?
Well, Rudy Giuliani and others, they've consistently said for months that it's wrapping up. I think just a couple moments ago, he said, oh, it's just down to parking tickets. Well, that's just not true. And we know that's not true for a few reasons. First of all, we still have the outstanding issues surrounding the prosecution of Paul Manafort. He won't even be sentenced until February in one case and then March in another. We also know that the grand jury continues to hear from witnesses. We know they've called witnesses regarding Roger Stone. We know they're in talks with Jerome Corsi about a possible plea deal that appears to fall through. I mean, to resolve all of these things, this is going to take months. So anyone that suggests that this is all wrapping up, that is just not true.
So you're projecting out till the spring?
Likely, yes, at least till March. I mean, that's when Manafort will be sentenced. And the special counsel continues to exist until each one of its discrete cases is completely resolved.
Trevor, in your op-ed, I mean, you take a kind of bleak view about what all of this means for the state of the country. You say there's really just deterioration in respect for the rule of law.
Well, I think the point there is that you have the defenders of the president, as well as the president himself, saying that violations of law don't matter. And I don't think that's where we are as a country. We believe in the rule of law. You could make the argument, well, it's more or less important. I obviously think it's more important. But to say we're just going to ignore violations of law because it's politically convenient to, we don't want to talk about it, is, I think, a real problem for the country. These are laws that were enacted after the Watergate reforms, when we learned the problems of corruption, of secret money in elections, of payments of hush money. Richard Nixon's lawyer went to jail for payments of hush money that were cash payments not disclosed. And I think the point that Paula makes is an important one, which is there are a lot of investigations all of a sudden. You open every door and there is potentially illegal activity behind it. The inaugural committee we now know about. Last week, the plea by the Russian woman who was working with the NRA and organizing trips to Moscow and organizing Russians to meet American politicians. All of this connected to different aspects of the Trump campaign, with a number of U.S. attorneys' offices looking at it. So it's not just the special counsel at this stage, and they all involve people who are close to the president, including family members.
Trevor, thank you. Paula, always good to have you on.